go with Daniel chapter 6. Daniel in the den of lions. Hold on to your seats. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So the administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king and said, "Oh, King Darius, live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, O king, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put decree in writing. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man except to you, O king, will be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands in accordance with the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to the king and said to him, "Remember, O king, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, who you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, who you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done anything wrong before you, O king." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in God. At the king's command, the men who would falsely accuse Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout the land, "May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. This is the word of the Lord. What a cracker. That is beautiful. Okay, there is a lot in this. Verse 1. Darius. It's really interesting. What struck me is that this Daniel, who is a slave, he survived 4 kings and 2 superpowers. That is quite some going. When he was first taken from Israel, he went to Babylon, and the king at the time was Nebuchadnezzar. And remember, they were told that they could eat from the king's table. They could eat whatever they like. They could eat the cuisse de crâneur, which apparently, I learned last night, means frog's legs. Does it? Where's Fabian? Did that work? He's not even here. Is he? Was that okay? Perfect. He could eat all of the rich food from the king's table itself, and he decided that he would not. He just set his face forward, that he was going to follow his Lord, and he was not going to defile himself, even though everything had been lost. And as a result, God was with him and used him. And he survived Nebuchadnezzar and his son Belteshazzar. Remember him? The writing on the wall, the hand pops up. Many, what? Someone said something. Thank you. Yes. He said that, wrote that on the wall, and no one understood it. And Daniel interpreted it. And then the next king, this one, Darius, who was a Medo-Persian. So they were both Babylonians, the first 2, and then the Medes and the Persians got together to bash the Babylonians. They took over the land, and they still wanted people to run the land, so Daniel survives. And then after this guy comes the next one, Cyrus, or Sirius, and then he survives that too. So Daniel, this slave, is lasting longer than the kings of the superpowers. There's something wonderful about that. And here's the context of this chapter. Is that Darius has just taken over a superpower, and he is the most powerful man on the planet, and he wants it set out right. He wants it to work. So he gets 120 leaders to lead the provinces, and then he gets 3 administrators over those, and out of those administrators, Daniel just really shines out, and as a result, through his gift, he is placed in a position of prime minister. So if you go to, not now, but later, if you go to 1 Corinthians 12, verse 28, you will see that one of the spiritual gifts is administration. 1 Corinthians 14 says, verse 1, eagerly desire the spiritual gifts. When was the last time you got down on your knees and asked for the gift of administration? We've just said goodbye to an administrator this morning. It's an incredible gift. The foresight that he had, you saw it in Joseph too. He could interpret dreams, but he also had the gift of administration. Well, okay, said Pharaoh, what do I do? Now you've told me interpretation. How do I get this resolved? Why don't you resolve it? And he had the gift of administration and resolved it. He saved a nation. Here, Daniel is saving nation after nation, superpower after superpower. And as a result, Israel will be given back their land. It's an incredible gift. When was the last time you eagerly desired any spiritual gift? Verse 4, they got together when they found out that Daniel was going to be put in charge of everyone. They were jealous. You've got to watch out. You've got to watch out. When you decide to stand for the Lord, there will be opposition. When you decide to not play along with everyone else, when you decide to not, change the books, when you decide to not cheat the system, when you decide to do everything honestly at work, it's going to cause ripples. It's going to cause an effect. You must put on the spiritual armor of God. You are ambassadors of Jesus Christ. There is an enemy that is prowling around like a lion, seeking to destroy you. You must put on the armor of God, Ephesians 6, verse 10 to 18. The helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, which quenches every fiery dart the enemy sends against you, the belt of truth that is buckled around your waist, your feet that are fitted with the readiness to share the gospel of peace, and the sword of the Spirit which is in your hand, which is the word of God, then make your stand. I do that every single morning without fail before I get out of my bed. Every single morning, you must be aware that there are people who are jealous of what you have. That there is an enemy who wants to destroy you. Put on the armor of God. Verse 7. Okay, let me just read verse 7. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any other god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. The belief was that when you were the king, if you made a decision, that you were possessed with perfect wisdom as king. So when you made a decision, it was perfect. So you could not change the decision, because that would suggest that it was imperfect. And that couldn't be, because you are the king and you have divinity. So they manipulated the situation, knowing that once he'd signed it, he couldn't unsign it. What does that speak to me? Watch yourself if you're in leadership. Be aware that when people come to you, they sometimes have agenda. Be aware. Have the wisdom of God, and anyone can have it. If you look in James chapter 1, verse 5, it says, anyone who wants wisdom can have wisdom. God will give it to you freely. Just ask, but when you ask, make sure that you believe. There are people who are trying to manipulate and to rob you. And here he is ripped off. But also the problem, did he believe it? Did he believe that he was divine? Was he deluded and so believed he was divine? Or did he think the whole thing's a sham, but I'm in a really good position, so I'm going to stay right here and not tell anyone? And maybe that had worked all his life until this point. He was like, oh man, they have just pulled the wool over my eyes. Verses 10 and 11. Daniel went to his room, where the window faced towards Jerusalem, and he prayed, as he always did, and he prayed out loud. You know that I'm really quite a rubbish Anglican, and I know that's brand new news to you. And I didn't know this sort of stuff for a long while, but Anglican churches face east. The altar always faced east towards Jerusalem. Do you all know that? Oh, some people don't know. Brilliant. Okay. They face east because they all need to face Jerusalem. In England, some of them don't, because they've changed over time as the churches have got bigger and roads have been built around them over hundreds of years. So when the church that I was in, actually it faced north. And it was one of the few churches that faced north, because it was when they rebuilt the church, there was not enough room for it to face east. But they all generally face east. And just made me think about tradition. You know, last week we talked about tradition. Tradition needs to work for you. It needs to enhance your worship and not crush your worship. And I'm just going to go back here and talk about this, because this, traditionally, during the Reformation, as you know, a lot of things changed. But one of the things that changed was Thomas Cranmer changed this. Before the Reformation, everything faced east. The priest would get up and he would do communion with his back to the people. Do you feel special? With his back to the people, and he would speak in Latin, which none of you would speak. You only speak English, you didn't speak Latin. And he would speak, this is in England, he would speak in Latin and do this thing, and there would be hand waving, and there would be bells that would ring at certain times. And that was the point when the bread and the wine, they believed, was turned into the actual blood and actual body of Jesus. So this would all happen, and then he would say his stuff, pray his prayers, and do his thing. There would be smoke. It would all be kicking off at the front. And then he would turn around and he would offer you all communion. But none of you would take it. The reason that none of you would take it is you were frightened. You were afraid to take it because you've all just been led to believe that this is actually not an act of remembrance, but this is an actuality, a turning into Jesus' blood and into Jesus' body. And so you daren't take it. What if you spilled Jesus' body on the floor? What would happen then? So no one would take it. So for years, no one was taking communion, and yet they wanted to. And Thomas Cranmer was the archbishop, and he just loved Jesus. He was flat-out worshipper for Jesus, and he wanted all of you to be flat-out worshippers of Jesus, and he wanted you to have communion with his king. Of course. So when he was archbishop, as part of the Reformation, he changed it all. And he's just like, okay, we are no longer calling it an altar. It is a table, because it is a table, because we don't need an altar, because this final sacrifice happened 2,000 years ago, or in this case, 1,500 years ago, with Jesus. We just need a table to put stuff on. This is an act of remembrance. And he would stand to the side so that everyone could see what was going on. And he would speak in English so everyone would understand exactly what was going on. They're still facing Jerusalem, so that's fine. There's no problem there. It doesn't crush your worship. But this was crushing worship. This was a tradition that was killing the faith and the worship. So he was just like, here it is, all out in the open. And he wrote a book called the Book of Common Prayer. Some people still use it. If he came back today, he would throw it out because no one speaks Old English apart from pirates. He would kick it out. He would get rid of it. Some people insist that the bloke puts his frillies on and does 1662, Howarth out of He would be mad. He would be mad about that. So he changed the whole thing. During that time, the king died and Queen Mary became queen. A bit like what's happening in our story, there's shifts in kings and kingdoms. And when Mary became queen, she was very Catholic and not really into a Reformation at all. And she threw the Archbishop Thomas Cranmer into prison until he refuted everything that he had written. So while he was in prison, the only way that he was going to get out is if he refuted it. So he refuted it. He wrote against it, crossed all out, and changed everything. And then he was released. And when he was released, he was placed in a pulpit and he was allowed to preach, and everyone is waiting to hear what he's got to say. And he's knocking out this sermon. And halfway through his sermon, he stops. And he looks around, apparently. And he says, may this hand that has betrayed me be the first thing that you burn when you take me to the stake. And he refuted everything that he had previously done. He refuted it, and he was like, Reformation, Reformation, Reformation. And they dragged him out of the pulpit, and they placed him on a stake, and they burnt him to death. And there are paintings of Thomas Cranmer. You Google them later, and you will see, and he is like this as the flames are licking his fingers, the first thing that is burning. Tradition has to work for your worship. And I remember I was during my curacy, and I'd taken a service, and it was an 8 o'clock service, and it was just full of old ducks. It was just not full. There were 8 old ducks at best. And this day, I think, was a great day. I think there were 8, wonderful. And at the end, there was a lady who would help me with communion to clear everything away. And she came up to me. Everyone else had gone, and I'm in my frillies, and I'm packing everything away. And she says, "Simon, what do you want me to do with the wine?" I said, "Vicky, I don't want to offend you." I said, "But I want you to throw it away." And I said, "Here's my reason why I want you to throw away." And I just told her a little bit about Thomas Cranmer, and that he had died so that we could have communion as a sign of remembrance, so that people would take it. I said, "So I would rather offend you than they meet him, knowing that he died so that we could do this, and offend him." You never know how that's going to go. She turned around, she looked at me, and she said, "Simon, I'm so glad you said that." She said, "Because Thomas Cranmer was my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather." Isn't that amazing? It makes me tearful now. It was like the Lord just bent down and went, "Mwah! That's my boy." But we still get bent out of shape about stuff, but we don't know what it was there originally for. It's there for the people to enable the worship, not to kill it. Get a bit excited. Okay. Okay, cross. Oh yeah, verse 15. So verse 15. Then the men went as a group to the king and said to him, "Remember, O king, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." At that moment, the king will realize that he has been well and truly ripped off. You know that feeling when you realize you've been ripped off? He'd have been absolutely gutted, but maybe for the first time in his entire life, he felt helpless, that he could do nothing. You know that feeling when you have nothing that you can do about it? I wonder whether this was the first time that he, the king, who they think is divine, felt absolutely helpless. Verse 16, "May the God who you serve rescue you." I love it that this foreign king recognizes, he may not know the Lord himself, but he recognizes the Lord in Daniel. That is beautiful. That is hard to ask for more as an ambassador of Jesus Christ, that all those around you may not have to believe what you believe, but they recognize God in you. That is beautiful. Verse 18, the king spent the night fasting. You know, we don't do enough fasting. I used to fast twice a week, and I hate to have to say I used to, because I don't. I haven't done since I've been here. And this is what we've been reading. This is just the jolt to say, "Come on, Mr. Flint, what are you playing at? Do you want the kingdom to come?" Fasting is such a powerful tool. When you fast, when you do without food, it's like the impurities are taken out of you, and it's like a honing. It's like all of a sudden you can hear more clearly. And I don't mean like hear the cars go by. You can hear God more clearly. There is a sharpness to his voice. There is a quietness to your rhythm. It does something really powerful, and it also shows God that you are serious, that you are like a dog with a bone. You're not going to let go, that you are determined. You want to see his kingdom break into whatever the situation is, and he loves that. In Samuel it says, "I will honor those who honor me, and by you sacrificially doing without for the sake of someone or something, I just think that makes him beam. When he sees his children sacrificially doing without for somebody else, for another situation, how can that not move him? It's beautiful. If you're not used to it, give it a go. If you want to know any more about it, just give me a shout. But this man, was fasting on behalf of his, I've got to say, friend. This man who didn't know the God of Daniel was fasting on behalf of him to the God of Daniel. And also, I was thinking about when we're praying, I'm just going to go to Psalm 139. You know when these verses, O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all of my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You know those words. You know that God is aware of every single moment, every thought as it comes into your head, as it leaves your head. He's aware of all of it. But when everything hits the fan, are you so sure of that? I wonder when he was fasting whether he knew these words, whether he even believed these words. But at the time, at the crunch, when it all comes together, when you are in that place of desperation, how sure are you of those words that he is aware of your thoughts, he's aware of your feelings, he's aware of your anguish? I just want you to know he is fully aware. He is fully aware of your every thought, of your every twitch of your muscle, of your every heartfelt cry. He is fully aware. The next morning, verse 19, he gets up and he sprints to that place. He sprints to it. There's the king, the one who's divine, the one that they all bow down to, the one who can do whatever he wants, apart from change his mind. Sprinting to see if this slave has been rescued. This ambassador of Jesus Christ, whether he has been rescued. It says, I'm going to read verse 23. The king was overjoyed because Daniel's like, yeah, I'm here. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted out from the den, no wound was found on him. Ready for this? Because he had trusted in his God. I wonder who he is talking about. The only person that we know of that is praying in this situation is the king. He's the one who fasted all night on behalf of Daniel because he had trusted in God. The assumption there for me when I first read it is it's Daniel. As I just look at it and meditate it, I think, who is the he that's being written about here? Is it Daniel that trusted in God, or is it the king that trusted in God? Was it both of them? I love it. I love the mystery. I love it that I don't know. He had trusted in God. Verse 24, I've written here, ouch. Verse 24, at the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children, and before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed their bones. Adios. It's easy to read that and think that God thinks that's a great idea. You have to make sure when you read the Word of God, you read it in context. It's easy to read that and say God justifies that the children and the women were thrown in even though they were completely innocent. This is the king's rule, and believe it or not, they make mistakes. Although he wouldn't believe it, and nor would they. They do. Not everything in the Bible is true. Oh! When the devil said to Eve, you will not surely die if you eat of this fruit. Was that true? No, it was a lie. Not everything in here is truth. The only bits that you can guarantee are truth are what the Lord says. When it comes to the people and their actions, they're not always good. They're not always what God wants. And this is a really, really good thing to know. I don't think God wanted all of those people thrown in there. I think the king wanted them thrown in there. You see the difference? It says it in the Bible. Some people think because it says it in the Bible, it must be true. Rubbish! You've got to get the context. There is masses of truth in here, but there's also masses of contradiction. And you've got to see whether God is speaking or whether people are screwing up. Because there's quite a lot of screw up in there too. Because it involves you and me. And we had to start the service by saying sorry. Why? Because we screw up. Ouch. Okay, verse 25. Or is that 26? I can't remember right. In 26. I issue a decree that every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. That is total stupidity. That is what gets the church into real trouble. This guy is convinced that God is God. So as a result of that, he's going to make sure that everyone fears God. You can't enforce people to fear God. They have to experience God. They have to experience the fear of God. They have to be led to that, not just told that you must. This shows his inexperience of walking with God, that he's trying to force it upon people. And that's what happened in the earliest part of the 20th century, is that church was all about you must do, you must do. Children must sit there and do, and you must wear this, and you must do that, and you must do that. Again, this regulation that kills faith. It sucks the life out of faith. Faith is a living relationship with the living God. And it's not about you must. It's about what do you want me to do, Lord? I'll do whatever you want. There's such a difference. And he's trying to enforce the fear of God. If you ever have experienced the fear of God, you know it. I remember once I was at something called Faith Camp. And there's a guy called Colin Urquhart. He was speaking and he started to prophesy. And he was prophesying in the name of the Lord. And this guy, a beautiful, holy man of God, just grounded in the word and grounded in the spirit. And when he was speaking, I'd never experienced it. I hadn't been a Christian very long. The fear of the Lord came upon me. And I was wholly petrified. Not in I'm in bits, I want to run away, but I am in awe and I am going to fall to my knees. When he spoke, God spoke, and I fell to my knees. That is a holy fear. And that is what we are called to with the Lord, a holy reverence, a holy fear. And you can't enforce it, you can only experience it and fall. The last verse. So Daniel prospered. Oh, hang on, no. I've got to read this again. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders. And in the heavens and on the earth, he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. How incredible. I love it. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. I've put here next to so Daniel prospered, but still no Lamborghini. So what I'd love us to do, isn't that a rich passage? It just blows me away. Fantastic. What I'd love us to do is I'd love us to go into a time of interactive prayer. And so to keep in theme with this reflection, I want you to think about a situation. It may be a world situation, but it may be a situation for you or your family. It might be a personal one, a physical one. It could be any situation where you feel helpless. That you feel that actually you can do no more in this situation. You can do nothing else to change it. And when you've thought of one, I'd love you to come forward and grab a piece of paper. If you don't want to come forward, get someone to grab a piece of paper and a pen for you. I don't want anyone to miss out. Grab a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to write whatever that is that you feel totally helpless with. I want you to write it down. And this cross I'm going to keep laid down, and on it are pins. And I want you, with whatever you are helpless to change, to come and to pin it on the cross and give it to the one who is able. Let's do that.